I'm Douglas Noble, and this is the NABWMT History Project. This morning we're in Washington, D.C., interviewing Dan Minns. Dan has been a member of the D.C. chapter since 1984 and involved with the National Association since the late 80s, when he helped write the first grant for the National Association's Task Force on AIDS Prevention. Later, in the mid to late 90s, he was both a volunteer and paid basically office manager of the NABWMT office in Washington, D.C., and he was an NA director from 1998 to 2000. Good morning. Welcome to the project. When did you first join the Washington chapter of BWMT?
Well, how I got involved in any gay groups at all is sort of interesting. So I've been married for 18 years and college professor and taught in Cleveland, and sort of at this point of changing my life, separating from my wife, and I moved to D.C. by myself and was sort of starting a whole new life. It was a new job at American University, and sort of on my own in terms of the gay scene, and I knew nothing about it, and I got a local paper. I didn't even realize there were papers, called The Blade, and at that time they would have a list of social organizations, and I was just shocked. I mean, they'd take up a whole page, and it was gay bankers and stuff like that, and right there was this group called Black and White Men Together, and I said, well, that sounds interesting. And I had 2 phone numbers, and I called, and one person said, oh, we're a sex club. And the other one said, oh, no, he shouldn't have told you that. We're a political organization. And they said, anyway, I knew nothing about the gays and the groups or whatever. And the person on the phone says, well, maybe a good way for you to learn is we have rap sessions every Sunday night. And we get a good turnout, 40 to 60 people at the Gay Community Center. Why don't you go to those? And that's what I did. And that's where I met couple people that are still my best local friends to this day, and I would just go to those sessions every Sunday, and every week it was a different topic, you know, why do people go off into the woods, or, you know, for anonymous sex, or more younger, older couples, you know, it was different, but it was a great way to get a lot of different views about what was going on, and that's how I got put in socially. You know, and then I became quite active in the local chapter, working on a lot of projects and events.
Had you been involved in any interracial groups or activities or social situations before you came to the D.C. chapter?
No, I wasn't involved in gay scene at all. I was, when I was teaching and married, I was active in things like social problems, you know, working on social problem type things, but nothing like that. I grew up in upstate New York, which is still quite a rural area, you know, the Finger Lakes. And, I was always very conscious of race growing up, even though everybody around me was predominantly white. But it was an area where at that time when I was growing up, a lot of the farm work was done by these black migrant groups that would come up from the south. They would actually come up for the summer and live in tents. And so actually, like on Sundays, you could drive around my area and there'd be huge gospel festivals and things going on from these migrant groups. And I grew up on a farm. Sometimes my dad would hire these groups, and I would talk with some of these people. And it always struck me how hard working they were. In this hot sun all day, pulling weeds and getting paid so little. And that's actually my first racial consciousness.
Do you have any specific recollection of your very first meeting in the D.C. chapter? What was it like? What were your initial impressions?
Well, my very first meeting would be that first rap session I went to. And there were quite a few interracial couples there. I don't remember what the topic was. I just remember how blunt and open people were in talking about anything. And I just remember this one interview, they got into a fight with each other, you know, and I was just, like I say, I didn't even know there was a gay scene. So this was my very first encounter with any sort of gay group or whatever. And then they have this open, very blunt discussion like that. I mean, it was just a surprise to me. I didn't know what they were talking about half the time. But it was a good introduction. And yeah, that was my very first.
So you were fairly active in the DC chapter those first few years.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your first involvement, what was your first encounter with the National Association?
I actually got involved with the National. I had met various people in the National when they'd come to D.C. and they'd come to some of our potlucks and things like that. I met Les Everett that way. So there was this peripheral knowledge, but like I said, I was kind of getting going on a new life here.
Mm-hmm.
So actually the D.C. chapter, to the extent that I had time to get involved in anything with a whole new job and all that, was pretty much D.C. But then the National, I got involved sort of through the back door. When the AIDS crisis came along, people in the National, a few of them decided to try and do something about it in a more active, big money way to have outreach to the minority community, because it was already clear right from day one that this was, of course, a tragedy for everybody, but it was especially bad in the minority communities and seemed to be spreading faster than in the white community. And Steve Feeback and Reggie Williams were saying, what can we do, how can we work on this? And Steve found a grant proposal from Centers for Disease Control, and he wrote the grant. And the grant had three components, and one component was they had to do a research project. They had to set up workshop outreach, set up an organization for outreach, and then do this research project where you basically began to get baseline information about what was going on within the minority community in terms of their knowledge about AIDS and stuff like that. And the assumption at that time was that AIDS was spreading more in the minority community because they weren't getting the information they needed to know better, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that all the messages, what few there were about AIDS, were white-oriented or more mainstream-oriented. And so part of this research project was to actually survey gay minorities and find out exactly what they did know. And Steve, not being an academic, my background is I teach at the graduate level. I teach research methodology, how to do surveys, how to analyze surveys, statistical analysis. And so Steve asked a friend of his. Steve was in D.C. a lot. I forget why at the time, but he was around here quite a bit. And we had a mutual friend named Carl Lindblad. And he asked Carl, who do you know that can do this research part? And Carl goes, well, I know Dan. And he hooked us up. I actually went over to Steve's house and in just a couple of nights wrote the research component of this grant. And never expected it would get accepted because it was very unusual. Our sample, the people we'd interview, we set up this thing where we wanted people who actually practiced gay sex. So we set up this sample where we would train interviewers to go out into the fields, you know, with their little questionnaire, and we would actually get people coming out of a park, coming out of a bookstore, and things like that. It was very odd, and but the CDC liked that because they would be real hands-on, and if you could get the people to talk to you, results that you could trust. So we got the grant. Everybody was quite surprised.
And the grant was for how much?
I forget the actual amount. It was well over $100,000.
From the Center for Disease Control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I say, they had the three parts. They had to set up this organization for outreach. They had to set up workshops that actually would be part of an outreach project, and we had to identify this baseline information in the AIDS community. So I was what you call principal investigator of that project for doing the survey and getting it carried out. And then Steve and Reggie were looking after the other parts, setting up workshops.
Reggie Williams.
Reggie Williams, yes. And setting up the task force. So the task force was originally a committee of BWMT for all practical purposes. And when we got the grant, I thought, oh no, what are we going to do now? I mean, it was really a surprise. Can't tell you how much we were all surprised that we got this big project. And so I actually set up a graduate level course in survey research at AU, built around the survey, where we went through.
That was American University.
At American U, where we went through all the stages of the survey. And this is common in graduate school, where you'll build a course around a project, and everybody gains. You know, we got highly competent people doing the project. Likewise, the students get experience with a genuine national survey, how it was done, and the data analysis and all that. So we all gained, but that's one reason we were able to hold down the budget. You know, a lot of it was done with AU's computer, and those graduate students did a lot of the work. And I think one reason that turned out well is that reason. So
you were the prime facilitator of those contacts with the students.
Oh yeah, I ran the class, the professor for the class. We meet every week, cover something new, and then relate it to the survey. So they were involved in question construction. It was a little odd for them because nobody ever said, well, Mr. Minns is gay, but yet here's all these questions about, well, when you're a man and you have sex with other men, you know, nobody ever said anything. Because it was a real project and everybody really, you know, they were serious. They wanted to really learn. But after that class, at least 3 members of that class came up later and said, oh, they were gay too, and interested in the, you know, results and how it went. And actually some of them continued to help a little bit on it later.
What were some of the results, or what general information did you draw from the survey?
I think members of BWMT don't appreciate how, because they don't know how significant the results were. And you got to remember, this was the very earliest days when you're just beginning to collect knowledge, and the assumption was that the problem for the spread of AIDS is that people just don't know. If you knew unprotected sex caused AIDS, then you'd stop doing unprotected sex. And what we found was, well, we found a number of things, but in terms of bottom line, what was significant, what we found was that minorities, even the most homeless person living on a bench, knew unprotected sex can lead to AIDS. I mean, it was crude knowledge. Okay, you could get into latex versus natural skin condom. They wouldn't know all that or whatever. But the fundamental knowledge that unprotected sex was a problem was out there. Okay, so that took away the basic assumption guiding AIDS outreach at that time. So it went from, the main conception went from, well, people just don't know, and all we do is need to find the best way to inform them. It went to, well, unprotected sex is more like people who continue to smoke cigarettes even though they know it causes lung cancer. It's closer to even addictive behavior where you know you have a drinking problem, but you continue to drink. It was more in that category. So we switched. That really changed perceptions. And actually, this has been verified many, many, many times since in subsequent studies done by other people, that the knowledge is there, that it takes something more than knowledge to change people's behavior. So that was the most significant thing. And then in terms of BWMT, we did that. You know, we made that major finding. We really altered the whole establishment at that time for how they viewed the spread of AIDS in the minority community. But we also had another impact. You know, we were setting up this task force. National Task Force on AIDS Prevention. And Reggie and Steve were running all that, and that they developed these safe sex workshops. So the workshops in the beginning were built on this earlier assumption that all you do is need to find out, you know, the knowledge, and then the behavior will change. Once this finding came out, they altered the workshops subtly. I mean, it wasn't a big dramatic thing, but the workshops got more into pressures, how to deal with pressures when you're with another person, to have unsafe sex, and that was added. And there's no way of knowing how effective that was, but nonetheless, the workshops after that point were much more, at least more realistic about what was really going on. And of course, the task force workshops were some of the very first in the country, so other groups were modeling their workshops after the task force workshops. So we not only changed the perception of how AIDS spreads in the minority community, but also the approach to dealing with it in the workshops was our lead. Other people followed the task force lead on this. And I think that's been forgotten over the years or lost. But we were really quite influential in the early days of the AIDS epidemic and combating it.
Well, hopefully projects like this will help people remember.
Yeah, I hope they do. And then the other part of it was the impact on the organization. I think, I've often said, I think that year when we did the project and set up the task force was BWMT's finest hour, because not only was our focus, you know, work on AIDS, and even though it was a tragedy, there was still this camaraderie of everybody coming together to work on something. Because it wasn't just the national. It was, when we did this research project, we went to all the largest local chapters, LA, New York, Chicago, DC, and to get interviewers to do this survey, to go to the bushes, to go to the bookstores, and find these people to give the survey. We asked the local chapters for their help, and they all came through big time. All the ones we asked came through in very, very competent, assertive, really hands-on. And John Bush and I, you know, two social science professors, we would go to each city for at least 3 days. They recruit people to act as interviewers. A lot of them would be local chapter members, but a lot of them weren't. They were just other people they knew in the community. Well, John and I, we had a 3-day training session. You had to go through all 3 days, include a practice session, going out one night and just trying it, and then come. Some of my best stories are still from those one-night training sessions. But
You want to
we
share
did
any of those?
We had one. You had to go on this training thing, and it was almost all. We preferred, obviously, minority people doing the survey. White guy would be quite involved or whatever. You know, we'd go on. But there was this one guy with Chicago training, and question always came up, guy, can you have sex with him later? You know, we'd say no. You know, there are always standard things like that. It was always an issue of, well, if they give a wrong answer to an no, we got to find out first, you know, what they do know. Later, you know, after it's all done, we can inform them. One story was that they would have to go out on a practice session, take everything we'd gone over and go out next Friday and see what happens. And there was this one at the local hospital, and you got this young black kid who just had his finger cut off, and just wanted to do this survey. This kid was still sort of, you know, dazed, and took him out for a cup of coffee and did the survey, and then went and found it was he never knew what was going to happen.
Now this was in approximately what year? The late 80s, right? Late 80s. And how long did the survey take? Over what time was both of your
the
class
actual
and the
where we
people
went
in
out
the
and
field?
collected data,
Yeah.
we tried to do within a 3-week period. Several chapters did it at the same time. There was slightly, but they were all roughly within the same 3-week period.
So the whole process, including your class and the
And the
survey.
class, the survey on were all sent here to DC. And then the class started.
I see.
We did that. So the class worked on data that had already been collected, verified.
And that was like a semester.
Yeah,
Yeah.
took all semester, and then analyzed the data. And
Mhm.
that's when we take the answers and find out people do know quite a bit about AIDS.
Well, what was the nature of your involvement if task force after the survey was completed and after the task force itself began implementing the?
Well, their first office was on Church Street in Cisco, and I went out there every couple months, and it would always be no one specific thing, but it would be what do we do now? And, you know, little meetings now and then about what to do, and I would have to keep signing off on certain things. And, they were sort of finding their way on. This was all new.
So you were kind of an advisor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for that first year.
For the first
year that it was set up.
And then after that, what? Did
Then
you
it was.
remain involved, or?
I remained involved, but it was mostly like a phone call.
Mhm.
You know, what about this? What about that? But not a formal role. Now they did. They were always applying for more grants, and of course, with grants, any sort of research component to it at all, there's usually general requirements about validating the procedures and how are you going to verify that statistically this is working the way it is. So I was written into future grants that they had received where I was to be, I would go out there now and then review. And, but then when Reggie left the task force and Steve left, all new people took over, they changed the focus. Minority people working in the task force. So that ended my involvement with
And that was in the mid-90s. Did you participate in any more surveys while you were still involved?
I reviewed several. They did a second follow-up survey of the first one, but they did it just for southern states. It included Latinos, and I reviewed all of that for them. They hired a organization called Polaris to conduct that survey, and I reviewed that and went through and pointed out problems. The involvement was always there, but it was more.
Well, what were you said earlier that was your association? What were your other involvements with the National? When did they begin? Did you attend a convention or?
Well, it was like I said, that got me in the back door to BWMT.
Sure.
The first convention I came up with working on the grant, where we'd gotten the grant, but we were still working on the questionnaire, was the Tallahassee Convention.
In '89.
Much as they can to do work on the grant, and it ended up having a pretty nice time. And that's in a way is what led to being more involved socially with the National. Was went to a convention to work on the grant and just made friends and know people and just got more pulled into it that way.
Have you attended most of the conventions since then?
About every other one.
What type of what type of memories do you have from conventions? Anything specific?
Well, type of person I am, my personality, I'm sort of more of a, I guess, loner type person. This total engagement with an organization as an organization, although I really like BWMT, believe in a lot of other things, obviously. And but what has ended up is a lot of really great one-on-one relationships with people through BWMT. Like I said, some of my very best friends today are people I've met in BWMT. People are still active. It's sort of that way, through the people I know and maintaining that. And then, of course, I got involved with the office stuff. After all the grant stuff died down, and I continued to teach at AU, and then I went on disability for time on my hands, and then, like I said, at that point I knew a lot of people, and Les Everett was coaching into problems with your DC office, and the guy who ran that office was let go, and it was sort of empty for a while, and Les just called and says, well, since you're sitting there around D.C., you know, would you like to just come in and maybe help us assess what needs to be done?
And that was around 1997. I
Yes.
guess. We'd had an office for several years
Yes.
established in the mid-90s.
And named Floyd at that time had already begun to go in the office and was trying to keep things going. And a convention was coming up soon. It couldn't have been for the office to sort of fall apart. And so I just went in, just basically did an assessment from a management viewpoint, and just found a lot of problems. And so then they decided they couldn't really afford a full-scale employee with all the benefits developing at that time, where you could hire somebody as an independent contractor where you don't pay benefits. They just have very specific tasks. You do those tasks and that's it. They actually then hired me as an independent contractor to run the office in well over a year. And Floyd and I started this process of, there was quite a backlog. Bills had not been paid for months. The DC employment had been paid for years. We were in trouble with the DC. Federal taxes had not been done right. And of course, co-chairs and members of the board were this, but we would sort of, I always hated picking up the phone because you got to say, see, you know, was that the time for 6-7 months? And
Letting the board know about the
latest bombshell,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Equipment missing, computer missing, quite a bit of stuff. And, but just little, all directories were gone. There was no original document like the bylaws and that. We had to call members and scrap back together the pieces and then redo them and put them in the files. I mean, really just fundamentals. Just we had to rebuild. And so even though I was hired to do the quote day-to-day, just reconstructing the office.
Right.
And it went okay. And that's when the independent contractor idea was, people just generally thought that was just a good idea. I think everybody did. And I think the reason for that was, and you get people on the board disagreeing, the office often got caught in the middle. And plus, you know, everybody's a volunteer on the board and there's co-chairs. And the temptation to hind on your work and then just call the office and tell the guy in there, well, could you do this, you know, and could you just do this by the time they would just be swamped with everybody adding on their work as well as what they're supposed to be doing in terms of everyday things with membership and keeping the bills and invoices going. You know. The independent contractor idea was a good way to manage that problem because the independent contractor, you just have a specific set of duties, okay? You don't do any more.